If you are a digital marketer or digital analyst and you want to implement marketing and analytics codes much faster, for example, Google Analytics, then Google Tag Manager is exactly what you need. But how to get started? How to properly create your first setup without wasting too much time looking for the right learning resources? In this video, I will show you exactly that. We will learn how to get started with Google Tag Manager, how to install Google Analytics 4, and more.
What is Google Tag Manager? The best way to explain that is to show an example. Here's a company, maybe it's your company where you're working, or maybe that's your client's company. And hopefully, just like probably any other business, that business should have at least one website, or maybe several of them. And in order to measure how those websites are contributing to website success, you need to use tools like Google Analytics or Google AdWords. And that's where you, as a marketer or maybe web analyst, join the game. You need to install these tools, their code, on your website. So if we're talking about Google Analytics, you need to place a little piece of code of JavaScript onto that website. And in the old days, the only way, or at least the most common way, was to ask a developer. For example, you have a bunch of codes that need to be installed on the website, and you ask a developer, hey, can you do this or that or whatever? Then a developer returns with a lot of questions, probably. For example, asks like, when should these codes exactly be fired on a page? Or maybe if you're asking for some custom data, like what custom data do you need to pass to Google Analytics or Google Ads or so on? So you are sending emails using Slack and sending a bunch of messages back and forth until you finally reach the agreement that a developer will implement your codes. However, that doesn't happen immediately because developers have their own priorities, they have their own deadlines. So usually it takes days, weeks, sometimes even months if we're talking about very large clients. So it takes a lot of time for a developer to add those tracking codes to the website. And each tracking code is called a tag. Now, with Google Tag Manager, what you could do is that in many cases, you could eliminate this part of the chain and you could implement those tracking codes by yourself. So for example, if you want to fire a Google Ads conversion tag on a thank you page, you can do that with help of Google Tag Manager by yourself. So basically, Google Tag Manager, it works like this. You have a website, and then on that website, you implement Google Tag Manager. So a developer adds a Google Tag Manager container code on that website, and then it activates GTM. From that moment, you are able to manage your tracking codes with the help of Google Tag Manager. And for example, if on a website, a visitor clicks a button, and you want to track that as a Google Analytics event, you can do that because Google Tag Manager will activate a Google Analytics tag and will send that information about the click to further tools. So basically, Google Tag Manager is a middleman between your website and third-party tools. For example, Google Ads, Google Analytics, and so on. So in the older days, you needed to ask a developer to add those tracking codes. From now on, in many cases, you will be able to do that by yourself, and you will be able to add event codes, page view codes, and other tracking codes of, let's say, Google Analytics or other tools in Google Tag Manager interface, and GTM will take care of when those codes will be activated on a site. Google Tag Manager has a lot of benefits to offer. So one of them was a bit mentioned in the previous slide. So all of your tracking codes are in single place because previously when a developer was managing codes, in many cases, those codes were scattered across the code of your website. From now, they will be controlled in a single interface of Google Tag Manager. Then you are less dependent on developers. Of course, this does not mean that GTM will completely replace developers. In some cases, you will still need them. And in some lessons of this course, you will notice that. You can add, edit, remove tracking codes much faster. In the older days with developers, you were lucky if you were able to get that code implemented on the same day. But sometimes you had to wait for weeks or even months to have those codes added on a site. So right now with GTM, you will be able to add that, test it, and hit publish within minutes, maybe hours, but definitely not days or weeks. Google Tag Manager's popularity is still growing. So this means that there is a very helpful community. There are various resources. There are many people who can help you. So you're definitely not lost and you're definitely not alone in this journey to learn Google Tag Manager. First, let's create a Google Tag Manager account and container. To do that, go to google.com/tagmanager. And you will see a page that looks something like this. Even if it looks a bit different for you, just keep looking for a button that says Start for free. Click it, and then you will see different view depending on whether you have an account or not. So if you are completely new to Google Tag Manager and you never had access to any Google Tag Manager container, you will see a view like this. And if you already have at least one Google Tag Manager container, a view might look something like this. In that case, click Create Account, and you will be redirected right here. Now let's create a Google Tag Manager account. Here you can enter your company's name. Just for sake of demonstration purposes, I can enter something like GTM course. Then you can choose your country. You can decide whether you want to share data anonymously with Google. And then you can enter the container name. In this case, you don't have to enter the URL right here. It can be just a simple word or several words. For example, blog, support website, main website, something like that. Or, of course, you can enter the domain. From what I have seen, in most cases, people are creating one container for one website. Therefore, you can, of course, enter here the domain of the site. But right now, we can enter GTM course website. In this course, we will be focusing on the web container. Therefore, choose this one and click Create. Speaking of other types of containers, this one is for iOS apps. This one is for Android apps. This one is for accelerated mobile pages, also known as AMP. And then this one is for server-side Google Tag Manager implementation. So click Create. Then you will need to agree with terms of service. And then you will see a pop-up like this. Now Google Tag Manager is asking you to add both of these codes to your website. For now, let's close this and we will get back in upcoming lessons. Before we continue, first let's take a look at the structure of Google Tag Manager account. Here you have a Google account. Now this account is designed to help you access all of the Google products like Google Analytics, Google Ads, Gmail, YouTube, or anything else. When on Google Tag Manager website, you clicked Start for free and then you were logged into Google Tag Manager interface, you are actually using your Google account. Then when we logged into Google Tag Manager, we were asked to create a new Google Tag Manager container. Now, the best practice is to have one Google Tag Manager account per business. So if you are a business that has 5 websites, you should have one Google Tag Manager account. And within that account, you could have multiple containers. Usually one container is for one website. Of course, let's say if you have 5 very identical websites and the only thing that differs is the language, then you could have one container for all 5 websites. But in most cases, it makes more sense to have one container for one website. So if you have a main website, blog, support page, something else, then each website could have a different container. Why different container? Because in that container, we will be having tags, triggers, and variables. Now I will talk about them a bit later, but basically your tracking codes will be held in that container. And usually tracking codes are different for each website. Therefore, it makes sense to have a separate container for every website. Before we continue, here's a quick disclaimer. Google Tag Manager is an ever-evolving tool. So what does it mean is that Google is constantly updating the tool, adding new features, sometimes even changing the design. So there is a slight chance that the view that you're viewing in your browser will be different from the view that you see in my video. All right, so now we are in the container of Google Tag Manager. A container is a place where you keep all your stuff related to web tracking. So for example, if you want to implement Facebook Pixel, Google Analytics, Google Ads, all of those tracking codes are stored in a container. And when a visitor lands on a website, first Google Tag Manager is loaded. The container is loaded. And then from that container, various tracking codes are activated based on your conditions. In the top menu bar, we have 3 sections: Workspace, Versions, and Admin. And right now we are in the Workspace. So this is the section where you will be spending most of your time because that's where the actual work is happening. And on the left side, you will find sections like tags, triggers, variables, folders, and templates. Tags are basically tracking codes that you want to activate under certain circumstances. Triggers are those conditions that define when the tag should fire, and variables are usually little pieces of information that you can use in your setup, or maybe some little helper functions, but let's not focus on that right now. Then you can also keep things in order by having folders and keeping your tags, triggers, and variables in separate folders. This works pretty much the same as folders in your laptop. When you make some changes in a container and you want to test that, then you will need to click the preview button right here, and then we will enable the preview mode that allows us to test everything just within the boundaries of our browser. And when you make sure that everything is working fine as you expected, then you will need to publish the container. And that publishing process starts by clicking the submit button right here. When you click this, you will need to enter the version name. Now, this is optional, but I highly recommend that you enter some descriptive and brief name of a version. And we will do that a bit later in the course. When I explain how to do that. So when a container is published, what happens is that a new version of a container is created. And you can see the list of versions right here. In the future, when you will be working more with Google Tag Manager, you will have more items in this list. For example, right here, I have a container already with 4 versions. Now, the reason why versions are useful, because if in case you publish something incorrectly and maybe some tracking functionality breaks your website's actual functionality, because that is possible, you can then quickly revert to the previous version and let's say publish version 3 to your visitors, because you know that the breaking changes were introduced in the version 4. And then the last main section of Google Tag Manager interface is the admin. So here we have account settings and container settings. Here you can click install Google Tag Manager, and here you will see 2 tracking codes that must be added by your developer to a website. Then you can also see container or account activity. You will see who did what. Then you can import container or export container. So this is quite useful. For example, if you want to reuse some parts of your container in another container, so you can just click export, select what you want to export, and then import those items in another container. Also here we have user management, so you can set some permissions on the account level. This means that your coworker will have access to multiple containers at the same time, or you can set permissions on the container level. If you want to create an additional container in this account, you can click on this plus icon right here. Also, one more place where you can get the tracking code of your Google Tag Manager, the same as it is right here. You can go to Workspace, and you can click on this container ID right here, and you will see that pop-up that we saw initially after we created the Google Tag Manager container. And that was a quick overview of a Google Tag Manager interface. To install Google Tag Manager, you have to add 2 Google Tag Manager container snippets to the source code of the website. Usually, this job is done by a developer. You can get those 2 container codes by clicking on the container ID in your Google Tag Manager interface. Click it, and then you will have to send these 2 codes to a developer. In this video, I will show you an example of how to add these 2 codes to the source code of the website. Now, keep in mind that this is just an example, and every website might have different content management systems, code base, or something else. So I just wanted to show you this because I want you to get a better idea of how things work. But remember that usually this is done by a developer. So if we read these instructions, you will see that this code must be added somewhere in the head of the website, and this code must be added somewhere in the body of the website. If you don't know yet, website's HTML code is split into 2 parts, the head part and the body part. Head part is responsible for various settings, loading scripts, meta description, meta keywords, meta title, and so on, while body is responsible for the content. So let's copy the first code. I can just mark this, copy it like that, and then I will go to the content management system of one demo website. And here I am already in the code editor of that website. And then here we have the opening head tag. So this means that this is the beginning of the website head. And here below somewhere, we have the closing head tag. The closing head tag always has this slash right here. Now it's perfectly fine to add Google Tag Manager container code, the first code, before the closing head tag right here, like that. And then after the head ends, we see the opening body tag. It might look like this. On some websites, it might look like this. So below this body tag, it is recommended to add the second code, which is right here. So copy this part and then paste it right here. Now, the first code is essential for Google Tag Manager to work. So this must be added somewhere in the code. It's recommended to have it in the head, but if your content management system does not allow to add custom codes to the head, it is still fine to add it to the body. But the sooner you load your Google Tag Manager container snippet, the better. And speaking of the body, well, now I'm not going to dive into details, but keep in mind that this is optional. You don't have to add this, but if you add it, then it is recommended to do so right after the opening body tag right here. So this is the opening body tag that contains no slashes. And then after that, we add the Google Tag Manager no script code right here. If you want to learn more details about the installation of Google Tag Manager, for example, why is this code not necessary, or where can you add it, or various scenarios where this code is added to the head, to the body, and so on, I will post a link below this video. So once you or your developer installs Google Tag Manager container snippets on a website, then let's click Save, and then let's check whether the Google Tag Manager is working properly. Let's go to Google Tag Manager, click on Preview, and then you will have to enter the URL of your website. Click Start, and if you see the connected widget right here that says connected, and if you see that Google Tag Manager Preview mode has also connected right here, this means that Google Tag Manager has been installed properly. So this is how you can install Google Tag Manager on a website where you or your developer has a direct access to the source code of the website. Now, if you're working with some popular content management system or maybe some popular e-commerce platform like WooCommerce or Magento or WordPress, there's a very high chance that someone has already developed a plugin that will help you install Google Tag Manager much faster.
If you already find this video useful, it would really help me a lot if you clicked the thumbs up button below the video. Also, if you want to properly learn Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics, then subscribe to this channel.
Let's talk about three main components of Google Tag Manager that you should be aware right now. The first one is tag. The tag is usually a tracking code that you want to implement on your site. It might be Facebook Pixel event tag, it might be Google Analytics page view, it might be Google Ads conversion code, or whatever. So if you want to activate a certain tracking code on a site, that is a tag. Then there are triggers. Triggers are conditions when you want your tags to fire. So if, for example, you want to activate your Google Ads conversion tag when a visitor signs up for your newsletter, that is a trigger. Other examples of triggers might be a page view, a click of a certain button, when a visitor scrolls for more than 25% of your page, and so on. And then there is a third component, which is called variables. Variables are little data points that you can use in tags or triggers. Sometimes variables might contain more information. Sometimes variables are even more complex functions. But in this case, you should start simple. So you can just think of variables as data points that can contain a single value, or maybe a bit more complex, but still some information, some data, or some configuration. When I explain tags, triggers, and variables to Google Tag Manager users, I usually like to start with three questions. So the first question is, what do you want Google Tag Manager to do? So for example, if you want to track a conversion, that's a tag. If you want to implement a chat widget on your website, and that chat widget requires to add a code, that's a tag. Another example could be, if you want to track a page view and send that page view to Google Analytics, that is also a tag. Then the next question is, when do you want that to happen? So for example, if you have a Google Ads conversion tag, the question is, when do you want to track that conversion? One of the examples could be when a form is submitted, when a button is clicked, or something else. So all of these situations are triggers. And then the last question is what, when, or how exactly. So if you want to be more specific, that's where variables come in. For example, if you want to fire your tag on a page view, the question is, do you want to fire on all page views, or do you want to fire on a specific page view? So if, for example, you want to fire only on one specific page, then the page address is the variable, because you want to fire your tag only when a trigger is page view and the variable is, let's say, page URL contains thank you or order successful or something else. So let's go back to that very first slide where we had tags, triggers, and variables. So once again, tag is a tracking code that you want to fire, but I mean, not only tracking code, that code might not track users. That code might, I don't know, change the color of a button or something else. But in general, tag is a piece of JavaScript that you want to activate on your site. Then a trigger is a condition when you want to happen. And then variable is a data point, or I don't know, some set of information or maybe some function that you use to either to make the trigger more specific or to transfer that particular data to third-party tools. And I believe that variables are the most confusing. At least they were for me when I was just starting to learn Google Tag Manager. So we can take a look at this a bit differently. At first, we have a tag. In this case, it's Google Ads conversion tag. So what do we want to do? We want to send a conversion data to Google Ads. Then the question is, when do we want that to happen? And that's where triggers come in. And our condition could be, well, we want to fire our Google Ads conversion tag on a thank you page. But Google Tag Manager is not a human, it's a system. And Google Tag Manager does not know what a thank you page means. We need to be more specific. We need to instruct the system to behave as we want. So in this case, that's where variables become very handy. We want our trigger to fire not on any page view, but only on those pages where a variable, which is page URL, contains purchase successful. Because we know that a visitor lands on this page only when that visitor has actually purchased something. So this is our conversion. Now you might be wondering, all right, so this might look quite clear. I mean, you can probably understand why this variable is used right here, but what about a variable in a tag? What kind of variable can we use in a tag and make use of it? And an example could be like this. What if we could send not only the fact of a conversion to Google Ads, but also the order value? And that's where another variable could be used. In this case, we could send the variable, which is order total, and that variable could send the value of $30 to Google Ads. And in this case, we could see not only the number of conversions, but we can also see the number of revenue that was generated because of Google Ads.
Before we continue, I wanted to give you a quick introduction to Google Analytics 4. Now keep in mind that this course is a Google Tag Manager course, so we will be focusing more on installing tracking codes and sending data to tools, for example, like GA4. But in this course, I won't be diving deeper into how to analyze that data or how to get insights from it, because that would be a job of a Google Analytics 4 course, not a Google Tag Manager. And now let's take a quick overview of what GA4 is. So Google Analytics 4 is a platform that allows you to connect data from multiple data sources. For example, if your business runs several websites and also an Android app and iOS app, in Google Analytics 4, it is much easier to streamline and collect data in a single property. Because of this, the structure of the property is also different if we compare that to Universal Analytics, which is also known as GA3. In Google Analytics 4, we have property and then we have data streams. So these are sources of the data from which the data then comes into the property. If you're new to Google Analytics 4, you should go to analytics.google.com and then sign up. Once you create your property, then you should go to the admin, and then in the property column, you will see a section called data streams. Click it, and here you will see a prompt asking you to create at least one data stream. But at this point, also there's a high chance that you already have at least one data stream. If you plan to use Google Analytics 4 only to analyze your website, then that is perfectly fine, and it will be enough for you just to create one web data stream. And in this course, I will be specifically focusing only on web platform. I will not be covering anything related to Android or iOS. So let's click on web. And here you will have to enter the URL of your website, the name of your data stream. For example, it can be the name of your website. And here you will see some additional options which are called enhanced measurement. Compared to the previous versions of Google Analytics, GA4 is capable of tracking not only page views, but also some additional events like scrolling, outbound clicks, or in other words, links that redirect visitors to other websites, then video engagement, which applies to embedded YouTube videos, site search, and file downloads. If you don't want Google Analytics to track these events, you can disable them one by clicking that gear icon, or
you can disable enhanced measurement altogether by clicking this toggle. But for demonstration purposes, let's keep this as it is. And then you can enter something like, your own website. But in my case, I can enter www, let's say, I don't know, mywebsite.com or something like that. And then enter the web stream. Now click Create Stream. And then you will see this view. The first part looks similar to the view that we saw previously, but also you will have some additional settings right here. So once you create your first data stream, you will see several tagging options, or in other words, how to install Google Analytics 4 on your website. For example, you can add Google Analytics 4 tracking code directly to the source code of your website, or you can use Google Tag Manager. And later in this course, I will be covering exactly this part. Also, it is very important to notice this part because you will be using this measurement ID multiple times in the future when you will be working with Google Tag Manager. If you are familiar with the previous version of Google Analytics, which is called Universal Analytics, you probably know that there were different data types that were sent to Google Analytics, or in other words, actually data structures. For example, we could send page views, then we could send events, e-commerce data, then social interactions, because there were actually dedicated reports just to social interactions, then timing, for example, page speed or something like that, and there were even more data types that you could send to Google Analytics 3. On the other hand, everything was simplified in Google Analytics 4, and now you can send events. So everything that you send to GA4 is event. Page view is an event, e-commerce data is an event, and so on. And after Google Analytics 4 is installed and after you collect some data, you will start seeing those numbers in reports. There are standard reports and they are available in the reports section. Also, if you want to go deeper and explore your data and create some advanced analysis, you can go to the Explore section. Also, there is an advertising section that is related to attribution and how you analyze various traffic sources and how are they contributing to your overall success. And then there are some configuration settings right here. Now, don't worry about the installation yet because I still haven't showed it in this video, but I will do that a bit later. So if we go to the reports section, here we have some standard reports like real-time reports, where you can see what has been happening on your website for the last 30 minutes. Then we have acquisition reports. Where are your visitors coming from? Like what kind of traffic sources? Like are they coming from Google search? Maybe they're coming from paid search, paid advertising, or maybe somewhere else. Then we have engagement. So engagement shows what kind of events are happening on your website if you're sending them. Then which pages and mobile app screens are your visitors visiting the most. Then we have monetization reports, which are also known as e-commerce reports if you're working with an e-commerce website. Then there are retention reports, but because of some web tracking limitations, I don't rely on them a lot. Then we have demographics reports. If you enable additional features that are called Google Signals, then you will get some additional details right here. For example, the age of your visitors, gender, and some additional information. And then we have also some tech reports. For example, if we click on Tech Overview, you will see what kind of operating systems are your visitors using, what kind of browsers, and so on. For more advanced analysis, you should go to the Explore section. And this is actually the place where I spend my time the most. So once you click Explorations or Explore in the sidebar, then you can choose from one of several exploration techniques. For example, if you want to prepare a certain table and see the data, then you can choose the free-form exploration. Now, as I've said in this video, I won't be diving into how to actually use these reports because there is some learning curve, and this would go out of scope of this Google Tag Manager course. Now, speaking of other features in the exploration section, you can click on plus icon right here and then click funnel exploration. Now, this is much more powerful compared to the previous Google Analytics versions because in GA4, you can also work with the historic data in your funnel analysis. Actually, let me show you a quick example of a funnel. Here's one of the examples, and you can add some additional features. You can make your funnel open. You can even see how funnels are changing over time. So if you have some time, you can definitely play around with these settings and take a look at what kind of insights can you get. Then another fairly popular exploration technique is called path exploration. This might look for you familiar if you have worked with flow reports in Google Analytics 3. However, this one is much more powerful. So if you start path exploration, you can go not only from the beginning of your path and then dive deeper, but you can also start over and start from the end of certain path. For example, you can decide to use purchase event as your ending point. We just need to find that purchase event. And once you find it, you click it. Obviously, purchase event tracking is an additional feature that you have to implement by yourself because that data is not available in GA4 by default. And then from that purchase, you can then go back and try to understand where those visitors are coming from, or actually what are they doing on your website before they make a purchase. So this might give you some insights, or maybe you might even find some loops where visitors are jumping between one page and another, and maybe there are some problems that your visitors are struggling with. Then, as I've said, there is an advertising section where you can play around with different attribution models, but again, this goes out of scope of this Google Tag Manager course. Then in the configure section, personally, I spend a fairly solid amount of time right here. Since I'm working with implementations, I use a lot one feature which is called debug view. And in this course, we will also be looking at this feature. So debug view is a very convenient way that will help you to debug the data that you're sending to Google Analytics 4. And that way you can make sure that you're actually sending data properly. And the incoming data might look something like this, where you have a feed, you can see what kind of events you're sending, you can click on that event and you can see what kind of information was sent together with that event. Then here you can also configure things like conversions. So in the past they were called goals, but now they are conversions. Or in other words, conversions are some particularly important events to your business. For example, purchase, or maybe someone subscribes to your newsletter, or maybe something else. By the way, keep in mind that Google Analytics 4 is always under heavy development. So there's a very high chance that when you watch this video, something in the interface of GA4 will look different. Because maybe Google will add some new features, or maybe they will move certain features, or maybe they will rename something. So keep that in mind. And then the final section that I want to quickly mention is the admin section. So if you want to add new users, or maybe create new data streams, or maybe import some data, or connect Google Ads with Google Analytics 4, or maybe connect with Search Console, you can do that by going to the admin section right here. Because when you create a property, it is under your account. And a single account might have multiple GA4 properties, GA3 properties, and so on. And that was a very brief introduction to Google Analytics 4. I could speak hours and hours about this platform, but again, this goes out of scope of this course because we are going to focus on how to use Google Tag Manager to install GA4 and how to send data to GA4. So we will still be going back to this interface and we'll use certain features that will help us to do that. Let's log into Google Analytics. You can do that by going to analytics.google.com. And then if you have at least any property, you might see a view like this, or maybe you will see something else. If you haven't yet created a GA4 property, you should go to admin and then click create property right here. Right now I am in an account where I don't have enough permissions. Therefore, I will switch to another property. Now I am on a different property, and as you can see, the button is blue. So you should click it. And then you should enter the name of a property. For example, it might be your website name. I will call it something like my demo website. Then you should select your time zone. You should select your default currency and then click next. And after that, you will need to answer several questions or just click create because these questions are optional. And once you do that, then you will see something like this. So here you need to create a data stream because as I've said before, data stream is a source of data from which you will be getting information into your Google Analytics 4 property. And here you should enter the address of your website and then the name of your website once again. And after that, click create stream. Now, I won't be doing that because I have already created a Google Analytics 4 property. But if you're new to this, then enter information in these two fields and then click create stream. When you create a stream, you will see something like this. Now, if you already had a GA4 property from the past, then you will still need to go to the admin section and then you will need to open your account. And after that, you will need to find your Google Analytics 4 property in this dropdown. Once you find that, then click data streams and then you will have some data stream right here. If you see a globe icon, this means that this is a web data stream. So now you should click on it. And what we are looking right now for is this part. Because in Google Tag Manager, we are going to use this kind of measurement ID. This ID will tell Google Analytics that when we send data, we want to send data particularly to this data stream. And therefore, this means that it will reach our own GA4 property. So now let's go to Google Tag Manager. Here I have a new container, so you should already have this created by now. Then click Tags and create a new tag by clicking this New button. Then click anywhere on Tag Configuration, because when we create a tag, we have to think of two things. One is, what is this tag going to do? And then when will this tag is going to fire? So first we want to answer the what question. And this means that we want to send data to Google Analytics 4. Click anywhere on Tag Configuration, then select GA4 Configuration Tag, because this is the tag that all your GA4 setups with Google Tag Manager should contain. And click on the tag. And here we have to paste that measurement ID that we got in the GA4 interface. So let's go back to GA4, that data stream, and click this icon to copy the measurement ID. Click it and then paste it right here. This is the very basic thing that you need to do when you want to install GA4. Now we have to configure when we want this tag to fire. Do we want to fire it on some pages, or do we want to fire it on all pages? And when I say all pages, I mean all pages where Google Tag Manager is installed. So now let's go to the triggering section. Here, click anywhere, and by default, you will have several triggers. In the future, when you work more with Google Tag Manager, you will have more triggers, because triggers are conditions when you want your tags to fire. In our case, we want our tag to fire on all pages. And as I've said, all pages means all pages where GTM is installed. So let's select this trigger. And this is it. This is the very basic setup in order to install Google Analytics 4. But we are not done yet. There are still several things that I will explain a bit later. Now let's name this tag. Usually I name it like this, GA4 config, and then enter the measurement ID. Because in some cases, you might find yourself in situations where you will have several different configuration tags in a single container. Now click Save. When it comes to adding tracking codes, or in other words, tags in Google Tag Manager, GA4 is not the only tool that is supported. If you click New while being in the Tags section, and then click on Tag Configuration, you will see a bunch of other templates that are supported. You can see Universal Analytics, GA4, Google Ads. Also, if you scroll down, you will find even more tools. Then there is a community template gallery. So if you click on it, you will see a list of templates that are not developed by Google, but they're developed by other members in the community. So they are kind of like third-party templates. But if for some reason you cannot find a template for a tool that you want to install, and you cannot find it neither in the template gallery or the built-in template section, then you can use a template called custom HTML. You can select this tag right here, and then you can just paste JavaScript right here. Of course, that JavaScript should be surrounded by these tags, because in HTML, when you add JavaScript, it must be surrounded by script tags. And that was a quick overview of how to install your first tag with Google Tag Manager.
By the way, if you want to learn more about how to get started with Google Tag Manager, I have published a free ebook, which is called Google Tag Manager for Beginners. In that ebook, you will find some additional tips that are not mentioned in this video. You will find the link to it below the video.
When you create a tag in Google Tag Manager, it does not go live by default to your website visitors. So this tag is still not activated on your website. To do that, you will need to publish your container changes, and that way things will go live. But before you do that, you always have to first test your setup. I cannot emphasize this enough, but testing tags is super important. So after you do some changes, always test them before you publish. And you can do that by clicking the preview button in the top right corner of your Google Tag Manager interface. When you click it, a new window or a new tab will open in your browser. To improve your testing experience, I highly recommend that you install Tag Assistant Companion Chrome extension to your browser. That's why it is highly recommended that you use Google Chrome when you work with Google Tag Manager. I will post a link to Tag Assistant Companion below this video. Once you click that link, you will see the install button right here. Click it, and then the extension will be installed. Once you do that, then I recommend that you close the Tag Assistant tab right here. You close that window that popped up in your browser, and then you will need to click the preview button once again. So once you install Tag Assistant Companion, then click the preview button once again. And then you will need to enter the URL of your page where you want to test this setup. I am now going to enter the URL of my demo website, but in your case, you should enter the URL of your own site and then click Connect. Then in a new tab, your website will open and you will see this badge that says Tag Assistant Connected. If you cannot see this, or maybe it says that the preview mode hasn't connected, then take a look at my blog post below this video where I explain how to fix the preview mode if it is not working. Ideally, you should expect to see the Tag Assistant connected right here and the connected word right here. Click Continue, and here you will see the title of the page where your Google Tag Manager container is loaded, and also several events. Right now, we are interested in the container loaded event, because when you configure your tag to fire on all pages, it means all container loaded events. Click this event right here, and here you will see that in the tags fired section, your GA4 configuration tag has fired. So this is a good start. But now we also have to check if this data that was sent by this tag has actually received the destination, which is Google Analytics 4. To do that, you should go to Google Analytics 4 interface, and then you should go to Configure section right here. Click it, and then go to Debug View. And here you should see at least one device. In my case, this is my device, and I see several events. So the fact that you see this event is a good sign, because it means that the configuration tag has successfully sent the page view event. And also with that event, a session has started. Now, if you want, you can click on this page view event, and then you will see what kind of parameters were sent together with that event. And one of those parameters is page location. So you can click on this triangle to expand the page URL. And here is the page. Now, if I go to another page, let's say to subscribe, then we will see another page view. And you can see that because this is the first page and this is the second page. And on that page, container loaded event fired once again. So once I click it, I will see that my configuration tag has fired. It has succeeded. And then if I go to the debug view of Google Analytics 4, I close this page view window, and then I can click on this bubble right here to unpause the stream. And here is another page view event right here. And if I click it, go to page location, this is the location of the second page, which is called Contact Us. And this is the exact page URL that I am currently on. If you have enabled the enhanced measurement feature in your data stream, and you can check that by going to the admin, then data stream in your property column, and then if you click on that web data stream, you should check whether this enhanced measurement is enabled. And if it is, then as you continue to browse your website, you will start seeing additional events. So let's go back to the home page. I can then scroll down a bit, and then if I go to the debug view of Google Analytics 4, so configure, then debug view, I will see additional events such as scroll and some others. Please ignore this one because I have created this property some time ago, and this event is coming because of some other configuration that I have done in this property. So I can see this scroll event because of the enhanced measurement. I can click it, and then one of the parameters is % scrolled. I can click it to expand, and here I can see that I, as a visitor, have scrolled below the 90% threshold of the page height. Now let's go back to the preview mode of Google Tag Manager and take a closer look at some features. So as I've said, here is the page title, and on container loaded, my Google Tag Manager tag has fired. I mean, Google Analytics 4 tag in Google Tag Manager. And if I click it, I can see what kind of information was sent. Here you can switch between names and values. So for example, if I switched to names and if I had some variables used right here, I would see variable names. And later, if you want to see what kind of value did that variable have, then you can switch to values. Since our current setup is very basic, we don't have a lot of configuration right here, but we still see that this is the measurement ID of the data stream to which we are sending data. Also, here we see not only tag details, or in other words, what was done, we also see the trigger information. In other words, when did this tag fire? And when you configured a tag to fire on all pages, in technical terms, it means that the event name, which is right here, event equals gtm.js. Now, if I click on another event, for example, DOM ready or window loaded. So on window loaded, our tag did not fire. Well, that happened because we configured the tag to fire not on all window loaded events, but on all container loaded events, because all pages trigger is all container loaded events. So if I select the window loaded, I will see that in the tags fired section, no tag has fired, and our configuration tag is in the tags not fired section. I can click it and I can see that the trigger condition was not met because this all pages trigger was looking for an event that equals gtm.js. But if I switch to values, the name of the window loaded event in technical terms is called gtm.load. Since gtm.load is not gtm.js, this trigger did not fire. Also, if you want, you can click on the page title and see which tags fired at all from this list right here. And we see that our configuration tag fired once. If we click summary, we will see that our tag has fired 4 times because it fired once on this page, then it fired once on this page, then on this page, and on that first page. In total, 4 times. Now let's go back to that container loaded event, click it, and then we see not only tags that fired or did not fire, we also see the variables. Later, we will take a closer look at some variables, but here you can see what kind of variables are now enabled in the container and what was their value. For example, host name is this one, or in other words, the domain of the website, and here is the full URL of the page. This is homepage because there's just slash and nothing else. But if I go to container loaded event of the previous page, we will see that the URL of the page is different. Refer shows the URL that was visited before this particular page view. Then there is a data layer tab, but at this stage of your learning process, it is too soon to learn this concept because it is too difficult. And then there is a tab for errors. So if some tag doesn't fire and that tag dispatches an error, you might find some information right here. When you have Google Analytics 4 installed on a website, Google Tag Manager's preview mode shows not only the information coming from your Google Tag Manager container and all the information that is related to GTM, but also you will see some information that is related to Google Analytics 4 property, because this is the measurement ID of your GA4 data stream. So if you click this one, you will see, for example, in this page view by clicking, that some hit was sent and that hit is page view. You can click on it and then you can see some technical information, what information was sent. For example, event name is page view. There's also another very useful feature, and it is important if you're just starting to work with Google Tag Manager and you need some help and something is not working properly. So if you are looking for some help, you can share the link to this preview mode so that someone else could also take a look at your tags and what is happening in your container. So when you enable the preview mode in Google Tag Manager, click 3 dots in the top right corner and then click share. Then make sure that you have selected not just global site tags, but you have selected gtag.js and your Google Tag Manager container. When you do that, then copy this link right here and send it to a person from whom you want to get some help. For example, if you're asking for some help in a forum, you can copy this link and paste that in the forum thread. Then another person that clicks this link, that person will be able to see this exact view, but that person will not be able to do any changes in your container. So you're kind of safe in this case. If you have way too many events and you want to clear this stream of events, you can click this trash icon right here, and then you will start fresh. So now if I refresh the page again, I will start seeing some new data right here. As you continue to implement more and more tags and triggers in your container, you will start seeing more events right here. For example, if you click some link and you are tracking link clicks, then you will see link click events right here. The same applies to form submissions and some additional events that you will face in the future. After you have properly tested your Google Tag Manager setup, now it's time to publish your changes so that this tag or maybe other tags that you have in container, they would go live for your website visitors. Or in other words, this tag and other tags would start tracking your website visitors. To publish the container, you should click Submit button in the top right corner. Click it, and then you will have to enter version name and version description. These 2 fields are optional, but I highly recommend that you enter at least version name, because later in the future, you will thank yourself for that. A version name could be some brief description of what was added or what was changed in this container version. Because every time you publish your container, a new version will be created. So in this case, we have installed GA4. Therefore, we can just enter a name like this. And then when you have entered it, then click Publish. If multiple people work with Google Tag Manager at your company, I would also recommend entering the version description. So in this case, since we have just one change, this version name is enough. But if you add, let's say 20, 30 changes in your container, then a version description will be helpful because you could enter something like changed this, added that. And then in the future, when someone will be reviewing the past versions and will be looking for something, it will be easier to find a particular version. But in this case, it is enough for us to have just the version name and then click Publish. After the version is published, you will see a version summary. You will see how many tags you have, triggers, and variables. And then if you go to the versions section, you will see that you have two versions right now. The first one is the empty container. This version is created when you create a new container, and this is the default version. So every time you create a new GTM container, a first empty version is automatically published. And then we see that the version 2 is the one that is currently live on a website. This is the latest version that we are editing in the interface, and this is the name of that version. So imagine this, if you have in the future, let's say 50 versions, and you notice that something was broken, I don't know, let's say a week ago. So you could go to the versions section right here, take a look at what kind of version was published a week ago, and then you can click on it to see what kind of changes were made. And also, if you had some description, that description would have been available here as well. So let's say that you have a situation that you publish some changes and apparently something in that container broke the website. Maybe you added some poorly tested custom code that conflicts with your website's source code. So in that case, what we could do is that we should quickly roll back to the previous version that was working for our visitors. So you could do that by going to the versions section of the GTM interface and then find the previous version that was working for your website visitors and in general that was stable. When you find that version, you can click on three dots right here and then click Publish. Then click Publish right here. And then you will notice that this version is the latest. So it means that we are editing this version in the Google Tag Manager interface, but it looks like there is a bug at the moment in Google Tag Manager because normally this version, which is version 1, this should be displayed as the live version. Anyway, so when you roll back and when you publish the previous container version to your website visitors, then you can freely go back to the workspace and fix your Google Tag Manager container to make sure that these new changes are working properly. And when you do that, you can click the submit button again, and let's call this quick fixes, and then you can enter what kind of fixes were made, and then you click publish again. When you do that, you will go to the version summary once again, and if you click on versions right here, you will see that right now version 3 was created and this version is now live. So your website visitors are getting this container version, and also this is the latest version that we are seeing in our Google Tag Manager interface. So what you see right here is that every time you publish a Google Tag Manager container, a new version is created. And that version is like a checkpoint in a video game. So if you mess something up in your current version, you can go back to the previous version and then publish it to your website visitors and be sure that nothing is broken on your website while you're fixing the problem. With Google Tag Manager, you can install not only tools that track your website visitors, but also you can add some custom code that, for example, add a chat widget. For example, on my website, currently I am running a Drift chat, and people that come to take a look at my courses, they can have a chat with me to learn more about the course. So if you want to add this kind of widget on your website, you have two options: either to add Drift code directly to the source code of the website, or you can use Google Tag Manager. In this video, I will not be showing how to sign up for a Drift account, but I will still show you how to install its code on your website with Google Tag Manager. So if I go to my Drift account, then settings and Drift widget, one of the options is install. If I click it, I will select the JavaScript option because I'm going to add JavaScript code to the Google Tag Manager container. And if I click it, I will get this piece of code. I will need to copy it and then go to Google Tag Manager. Here I can click either new tag right here in the overview or go to tags and then click New. In the tag configuration, I should click Anywhere, and then I should select the custom HTML tag. Because if you do a search in this list, you will not find a drift tag template. So once you select this tag, then paste the code. And as you can see, this code is surrounded by script right here and right here. Then I will name this tag. I usually name them like this. CHTML stands for custom HTML. And then the name of the tool, for example, that I am installing, which is Drift in this case. And then I need to configure when do I want this tag to fire. According to Drift, this should be added to every page where I want to see the Drift widget. So let's say that I want to install it on every page. That is why in Google Tag Manager, I should click on triggering and then select all pages. Click Save. Now we need to test whether this is working properly. So click Preview. And then when the preview mode is connected, I should go to my website and I will immediately see the widget appear right here. Also, if I go to the preview mode and click Container Loaded, because that is the event of all pages, I will see that two tags have fired. One is GA4 configuration tag, and the other one is custom HTML tag that fires the drift code. So when I make sure that this is working properly, then I should go to Google Tag Manager, click Submit, and publish my Google Tag Manager container. If you're familiar with event tracking in Google Analytics 3, you remember that events are tracked with three parameters: event category, event action, and event label. Well, in Google Analytics 4, the data structure is more flexible, therefore these fields are no longer needed. When you're tracking events with Google Analytics 4, you are now in charge of what kind of data are you going to send. If, for example, you're tracking form submissions, you can track things like form ID, form name, maybe you have some additional fields, and they don't need to be stored as category, action, or label. And later I will show you what I mean. When it comes to event tracking in GA4, there are four categories or four types of events. The first one is automatically tracked events. Then there are enhanced measurement events. Well, there are also kind of like automatic tracked events. So if you want, you can combine these two types into a single one. Then you can follow the naming convention of Google Analytics 4 and use their recommended events. For example, for form submissions, you can use an event called generate lead. And if none of these types cover a certain event that you want to track, you can send custom events. So these events can be whatever you want. If you want to send an event that is called, let's say, selected option, you are free to do so. So now let's take a closer look at each event type. When it comes to automatically tracked events and website, there are several things that Google Analytics 4 tracks automatically. So if a visitor lands on your website for the first time ever, it automatically dispatches an event called first session. Also, since a new session starts, then an event session start is automatically dispatched as well. And then there is user engagement. So user engagement is fired when a visitor is engaged. For example, views more than 2 pages, and there are some additional conditions. When it comes to app tracking, there are more automatically tracked events. And if you want to learn more about that, I will post a link to the official documentation of GA4. Then the second type of event is enhanced measurement. You have already seen the settings of these events and the settings of the data stream. And I'm talking about web data stream. These events apply only to websites. And you can find those settings by going to admin, then data streams, select web data stream, and then enhanced measurement section. And as you can see right here, all of these features are now enabled. If you want to disable some of them, because in the future you might notice the need for that, then you can click on this gear icon and then disable them one by one and click Save right here. So when it comes to scrolling, this event fires when a visitor scrolls below the 90% threshold. Outbound clicks event fires when a visitor clicks a link that redirects your visitor to another website. Or in other words, clicks a link that redirects to another domain. Then there is site search. So if your website has a site search and the search information is available in the page URL, then this event will capture that. And if you want to customize this event, you should click Show Advanced Settings and then enter the parameter in the URL that shows the search query. For example, on WordPress websites, the search query comes after question mark and then S equals and the search term. Video engagement event tracks embedded YouTube videos on your website. However, there are some situations where this automatic feature isn't capable to solve. So in that case, you might want to disable that and implement video tracking with Google Tag Manager instead. And then there are file downloads. So if a visitor clicks a link that opens or downloads, let's say, a PDF file on your website, then this event will fire. Speaking of support file types that are tracked automatically by GA4, these are the files. For example, .pdf, Word files, text files, rich text files, CSV, and so on. If you want to go beyond the automatically tracked events and you want to send some additional information that GA4 is not capable of tracking automatically, then you want to take a look at the recommended events. Below this video, you will find a link to the official documentation of GA4, where there is a list of all recommended events that you can use. For example, if a visitor can log in on your website, then you can consider using login event. And if you click this event right here, you will be redirected to a developer documentation where you can see the event name and some additional recommended parameters that you can send together with that event. For example, if a visitor can log in via email on your website or via Google login, then a method parameter might be useful. So you can send that parameter together with the login event. So every time you plan to track new events, I would highly recommend that you first check the list of recommended events before you consider tracking custom event names. So here we have other events like purchase, let's say search, sign up when someone registers on your website. If you are an e-commerce business, there are some additional events such as generate lead, add to cart, and there are also several recommended events for game developers. And if after looking at this list, you could not find a certain recommended event name, then you are free to enter any event name that you want in your Google Tag Manager configuration. Later, I will show you one example of a custom event. When you implement event tracking and you start collecting some data, that event information will be available in several sections of the GA4 interface. For example, if you go to reports, then engagement and events, you will see the report that looks like this. This is the list of events that are currently tracked in my Google Analytics 4 property. Some of them are test events, so you should ignore these two. But in general, when it comes to naming your events, it looks like Google is recommending to use the following convention that is also known as snake case, which is all lowercase and words are separated with underscores. Then you can see some metrics, for example, the event count, how many users sent those events, the event count per user, and so on. So if you want to do some quick basic analysis, then this report is what you need. If you want, you can click on that particular event, and then you can take a closer look at it. You will see things like events in the last 30 minutes, then you can see this particular event by country, and so on. Another section where you can use this is the exploration. And for example, you can click on freeform and then build a report. For example, instead of city, I want to see the event name. So here I am going to see what kind of events were made on my website, when, and in this case, I am splitting this based on the device category. But since I didn't have any traffic from mobile devices, all I see is desktop. Also, the list of all events is available in the configure section. And once you go there, the first item is events. And once you click it, you will see a general overview of all events. And you can click on any of these events to learn more about this. But basically, you will be moved to the same section that it was available in the reports section. So personally, I don't find myself using this part in the configure section very often. However, there is one thing that you might find useful, and that is conversions. So if there are certain events that are more important to your business, now in GA4, it is fairly easy to mark that particular event as a conversion. So if you go to configure and events, then you can just click this toggle, and that particular event from that particular moment when you enable this, it will be treated as a conversion. So it means that in certain parts of the interface of GA4, that event will be counted as a more important one. A really cool thing about Google Tag Manager is that you can specify when exactly would you like to fire certain tracking codes. In previous examples, we were using the same trigger, which was called all pages. And this is pretty much self-explanatory because, well, this trigger sets the tag to fire on all pages where Google Tag Manager is installed. But what if you want to fire a tag only on certain page or maybe under some other condition? Well, that is fairly easy to do with Google Tag Manager. So let's say that on our website, people can buy a certain product. And when they do that, they are redirected to a thank you page, or in other words, order confirmation page. And on my demo website, you are looking exactly at that page. So let's say that we are running Google Ads for our business, and we want to measure the success of our campaigns. We want to know which campaigns perform better and which ones are doing poorly, so that we could maybe disable them in the future. So to do that, we would need to have a more precise trigger, because all pages in this case would not work. We want to send data to Google Ads about a successful purchase only on this thank you page. And we can do that by creating a more precise trigger. So let's go to Google Tag Manager, Triggers, then New, Trigger Configuration, and then let's say Page View. So when a page loads, we want to fire our Google Ads conversion tag. And we will later in this video create that tag. But we don't want to fire on all pages. We want to fire only on some page views. And when we select this option, we get several variables right here. One of them is page path, the other one is page URL. So we could use one of them in order to make this trigger more precise. But right now we are not sure which one should we use. So let's take a look, what can we do? So I will close this trigger creation window, and then I will click Preview button. Then Google Tag Manager preview mode will open, and instead of homepage, I will paste the URL of our thank you page and I will click connect. Now I am on my thank you page. Tag Assistant has connected, or at least it is trying to connect. And now it has connected successfully. So once this is done, we could go back to the preview mode of Google Tag Manager, click on Container Loaded, because this is the event on which we plan to fire our tag. So I click it and then I go to variables. And let's scroll down and see what kind of variables do we have. Page host name. Well, from this value, we cannot tell that this is homepage or thank you page or something else. Well, looking at the page path, this is more meaningful because this says that the URL contains /pages/payment successful. Payment URL is also an option. So this is the entire URL that is displayed right here. And part of that variable contains purchase successful. So in this case, it doesn't really matter. We can use page path or we can use page URL. They will both bring the same result. Well, just for demonstration purposes, let's say that I will be using page URL. So let's go to Google Tag Manager, Triggers, and create a new trigger by clicking this new button. Then I will click anywhere on trigger configuration, page view, then some page views, and then I will select page URL. Now I need to specify this filter. Page URL contains, and then this part, which is /pages/purchase successful. I will copy it and then I will paste it right here. So if a page view occurs and the page URL contains this part, it means that we are currently on a order confirmation page. So we could use that as a triggering condition. Now let's name this trigger. I usually name it like that, page view, and then let's say purchase successful, and then click save. Now it's time for us to create a tag. Let's go to tags. And as I've said earlier, we are going to create a Google Ads tag. Click new, click tag configuration, and then select Google Ads conversion tracking. In this video, I presume that you have at least some basic knowledge of what Google Ads in general is. And I presume that you already have a Google Ads account. So I will not be diving into that part. And basically when you log into that account, you create a conversion in Google Ads interface, and then you get two values, which is conversion ID and conversion label. Now, for sake of demonstration, I will just enter some gibberish, but basically you would need to get this information from your Google Ads account. And then in the conversion label field, there will be some other value. Then in the triggering, click anywhere and select the trigger that we have just created, which is page view purchase successful. Now let's name this tag. I usually name it G-Ads, and then let's say purchase. Click save. By the way, in this lesson, I'm going to ignore this warning, but if you're actually working on a project, you should click this create button and then create another tag without any modifications. At least that's how it usually works. And then just create this tag. But now I'm going to create a Google Ads conversion tracking tag without a conversion linker. Click save. Oh, actually, this should be just a number. So something like that. Click save. And now let's test if this is working properly. So click preview. This will refresh the preview mode. And on our purchase successful page, we will see that the tag assistant has connected, and on container loaded, we have 3 tags fired. GA4 configuration tag, because it fires on all pages. Drift is also firing on all pages, and Google Ads tag is firing because the page URL contains purchase successful. You can click on this tag and you can see what kind of information was configured in this tag. We can see the conversion ID, conversion label, and also in the firing trigger conditions, we see that 2 conditions were met. One means page view and the other one is page URL. So this is the current value that is available on container loaded event, and we are looking for contains and this. So since this contains this, the trigger has successfully fired and it is marked with a green check mark. If, for example, I go to window loaded and click on Google Ads tag, you will see that condition was not met. Even though page URL is correct because it is marked with green check mark, the event name is incorrect because we're looking for gtm.js, which is page view, but we are getting gtm.load, which is window loaded. Also, there are some additional options how you can check your Google Ads setup. For example, you can install a Google Tag Assistant legacy extension. You can enable it on your thank you page, then reload and see if Google Ads conversion tracking is marked as green. So it means that the request was sent to Google. And then after several hours, maybe the next day, you should start, or at least you should expect to start seeing some conversions in your Google Ads reports as well. Of course, if you're actually getting some conversions from your website, and if those people before the conversion, if they click your ads. So when you make sure that everything is working properly and everything is tested, don't forget to publish your changes. And you can do that by clicking the submit button and then completing all the steps that GTM asks you to complete. When it comes to triggers in Google Tag Manager, there are more different trigger types that you can use, not only page view. If you go to triggers and then click new and trigger configuration, you will see other event types. For example, when someone clicks on a link, when someone clicks on any element on a page, when an element appears on the screen, when the form is submitted, when a visitor scrolls below certain threshold that you configure, when a visitor watches or interacts with your embedded YouTube video player, then we have a bunch of other events as well. So if you have time, feel free to play around with these options and see how they work. Let's take a look at how can we track an event with Google Analytics 4, and that event is not based on a page view, but on some other interaction. For example, a link click. Here on my demo website, I have a menu bar, and let's say that I want to track the clicks on these links. I want to understand which menu items are the most important to my visitors. So what could I do here is first enable the preview mode of Google Tag Manager, and you already know how to do that. So if you haven't done that yet, then you should click the preview button and then enter the URL of your website, and then I will interact with any of these links. So for example, I will click the first link and the page reloaded. This is the same homepage. Actually, I can maybe go to catalog and then the URL of the page has changed. After I click the link, the page loaded, maybe the same page, maybe the new page, I can see these right here. So every time new page is loaded, a new batch of events is available right here. And as you can see, we have link click on this page and link click on this page. I'm seeing link clicks right here because I have already installed Google Analytics 4, and together with that, I have also enabled enhanced measurement. You can check if you have enabled enhanced measurement by going to admin in Google Analytics, then data streams, select website data stream, and then checking the enhanced measurement status right here, and if things like outbound clicks or file downloads is enabled. So since these events are enabled, link clicks are available in the preview mode. Now, if you don't plan to work with GA4, or maybe you have for some reason disabled enhanced measurement, here is what is going to happen. So now I will just turn off enhanced measurement, and then let's say after 30 seconds or so, I will refresh the page once again. In fact, I will probably first clear the event stream right here, and then I will refresh the page. So now we see some events from that page. And then if I click a link, for example, catalog, you will notice that I don't have any link click events right here. This is happening because by default, Google Tag Manager does not have link click tracking capabilities enabled. We have to do that manually. And we can do that by going to Google Tag Manager, triggers, then new trigger, trigger configuration, and then just links. And right now, this will be tracking all link clicks on a page. Now let's name this trigger. Let's say all link clicks, and then I will click save. So when we do that, now we should check whether this enabled link click tracking on a website. So let's click the preview button, because every time you do some changes, you have to click the preview button to refresh and load the latest version of the container on your website. So now I have refreshed the preview mode, and I will click on, let's say, contact. And once I do that, I go back to Google Tag Manager and I see the link click right here. But if I click this and go to variables, you will see that there is nothing useful here about the actual click. Like, what was the link that I clicked? What is the text of the link? Or maybe some additional information. So if you want to start seeing some click information in the variables section, you have to go to Google Tag Manager, variables, and then enable click related variables that are built in. So you should click configure in the built-in variables section, and then click checkboxes next to all click variables right here. Then for a while you will see loading saving, so this is normal. And when that ends, you can refresh the preview mode and see if those variables work. Click the preview button to refresh the preview mode. And now let's click those links in the menu once again. So I will click, let's say, catalog, and let's go back to the preview mode to see what do we have. Now let's click the link click event right here and go to variables. And here we will see some additional information about the click, like click text, which is right here. So this is the value. Then we have click URL. And I think that these variables are useful because we could send their values to Google Analytics. And later in the reports, we could see that most people, for example, click on the catalog link instead of, contact us or something like that. So now let's start preparing an event tag that is going to send the menu link click to Google Analytics 4. We can do that by going to Google Tag Manager, tags, then new, tag configuration, and this time we're going to use the GA4 event. GA4 configuration is used for page view tracking and for the basic installation of GA4. But if you want to start sending events, you need to select GA4 event. Then here we have to select the configuration tag that we currently already have in the container, because this event tag will take certain settings from the configuration tag. For example, measurement ID. So in the configuration tag, click right here and select your existing GA4 configuration tag. Now the event name. As I've said before, you need to enter some event name right here because that event name will be later displayed in the reports. Below this video, you will find a link to another documentation of GA4 about enhanced measurement events. And here you will see a list of all events that are tracked. For example, view search results, click, page view, and so on. Click as an event name for me is too generic and I would like to be more specific. That is why I still use menu link click. But when it comes to parameters, we can take a look and see some examples. For example, with the click event, Google Analytics 4 is tracking a parameter called link URL. Since we are interested in tracking link URLs right here, we could use the same parameter right here. So it makes sense to use link URL. Now, when it comes to link text, there's another event which is called file download. And this one tracks the following parameters. And one of them is link text. So I could use that one right here. So I hope that this makes sense why I'm using these exact parameter names. Additionally, if you have more information about the link, you could come up with some other parameter right here. Let's say menu category or maybe something like that. Or you know what? Let's pretend that I have a menu with multiple levels where menus expand. There are some additional items that appear, and I want to also track the menu category or something like that. Therefore, I enter this parameter right here. Now, what should we enter in the value? Well, the power of Google Tag Manager is that we can use dynamic variables, and they can insert automatically particular value about that element with which I as a user interacted. So for example, when a link is clicked and I want to get link text, I could use a variable called click text. So when I click the link catalog, that variable will return catalog. If I click, let's say, contact, then another link click event will appear and its value will be contact. So this is dynamically displayed right here, and we could get that dynamic value in our tag. So in the link text parameters value, we could insert a variable, and we can do that by clicking this Lego button right here and then select click text. The reason why I choose click text is because click text is displayed right here. Now, when it comes to link URL, we have another variable, which is click URL, and it returns the URL that was clicked. Not the URL that is displayed right here, but the URL of the actual link. So I can do that by clicking the button once again, and then select click URL. Now, when it comes to menu category, as I've said, we are just making this up and I don't actually have any data about menu category. So just let's pretend that the menu category right here will be named main or something like that. But ideally, you would need to have some variable about that menu category, maybe in a thing called data layer. But again, I'm going to advance right here. So basically, let's pretend that this is also some variable, and at the moment, this variable will return the word main. Or maybe, you know what, maybe this should be named not the menu category, but let's say menu location, because maybe our website has two menus, one in the header and one in the footer. Let's imagine that. So instead of main, I will add, let's say, top menu. And then if a visitor clicks a menu at the bottom, then that variable would return bottom menu or something like that. But right now, this is just a text. Now, how can you distinguish a variable from a text? You can do that by looking at these curly braces. So if some word or maybe words are surrounded by double curly braces, this means that this is a variable in Google Tag Manager. And if there are no curly braces, or maybe you're just surrounding it by single braces, then this is just a regular text. So when it comes to tag configuration, for this case, this is enough because we're going to send the menu link click event and we're going to send 3 parameters. Now in the triggering section, we have to come up with some condition where we're going to fire tag only if link click occurs and that link click is on a menu item. So let's take a look. What can we do here? So in the triggering section, click anywhere, then click plus to create a new trigger, or if you want, you can update your existing all link clicks trigger. That is fine as well. In fact, this is exactly what I'm going to do. So I will open my link clicks trigger, but if I click it right here, it will select the trigger. If I want to edit the trigger, I will click this icon right here. This will open the editing mode. So now, instead of all link clicks, I will select some link clicks. And here I have some options how to make this trigger more precise. Now let's take a look. What can we do about this? Because right now we don't know which exact variable should we use in order to distinguish that this link came from menu and not from some link in a text or in the content of the website. Right now I'm going to click several links, and to make this more convenient, I will be holding the control key on my keyboard since I'm on Windows, and then I will click this link, this link, this link, this link. They open in a new tab and this page is not reloaded. So now I should go back to the Tag Assistant of Google Tag Manager and start looking for a page with a bunch of link click events. And here they are. These were clicks on the menu item links. The first one, the second one, and you will see that some values are changing. For example, click text is changing because, well, I clicked different links. And what we are looking right now is that we are looking for a variable that is same on all 4 link clicks, and that variable's value indicates that we are looking at the same link clicks. Now let me show you what I mean. So if I click on the first link, I see click classes. And here I see site nav link or site nav link main. Nav link in this case means navigation link. Now if I click on the second event, this value is still the same. And on this case, value is still the same. Here, again, value the same. So I could presume that all menu items have this click class. Now, keep in mind that websites are coded in different ways. So on my website, click classes looks like this. On your website, click classes might be something else. Or also it is possible that click classes will have no value at all. So this depends on how developer built your website. But in my case, site nav link or site nav link main looks like a good option to make my trigger more precise. So what could I do is that I can go to Google Tag Manager and select that if click classes contains site nav link main without quotation marks, and I copy that value and enter right here, then it means that this trigger is firing on menu link click. So instead of all link clicks, I will rename this trigger, let's say link click menu, and then click save. Now I can select this trigger that is now more precise, and it is added right here. if in the future you want to remove a trigger, you should click this button right here. If you want to add more triggers, then you can add them by clicking this plus icon. And now let's rename this tag. I usually do it like that. The name of a tool, which is GE4, then the type of data that I'm going to send, so it's event, and then the name of the event, menu, link, click. Click save. Now it's time to test everything. So click preview to refresh the preview mode. When the preview mode is connected, then let's go to the website. And again, I'm holding my control key and I will click on home, catalog, blog, subscribe, contact. But also I will click on this link on a footer because let's say that this is not a menu link. So I want to make sure that on this link click, my tag does not fire, while on these link clicks, the tag fired. So I will click right here. Now let's see what we have. And we can do that by going to the preview mode of Google Tag Manager and looking for that page where we had a bunch of link clicks. And here it is. On the first link click, my tag fired. If I click on it, I can even make sure why it happened because, well, if I switch to the names, I will see that click classes contains site nav link and this condition was met. The event name, well, the technical event name is called link click. So it means that the event was link click. And then you can ignore this part because this is some technical magic that is not important for beginners. Then we can click another event, and as you can see, this is still in the tags fired section. Here it fired, here it fired, and now on this one, it should not fire because I was clicking not on the menu link. And once I click this event, the tag did not fire. Well, let's take a look why. I will click on the tag while having that link clicked right here. And then we see that the event is link click. This is also matched, but click classes does not contain the value that we are looking for. In fact, if I switch to values, I will see the value of that link and click classes on that link did not contain anything, so it's empty. And since empty does not contain this, the trigger did not fire. Therefore, we have this X. So this is a good start because we see that our tag is firing on certain link clicks. Well, actually, it looks like I have closed too many windows. So I will click that reopen button once again, and we are again connected. And if you want to make sure that you're actually like really sending properly data to Google Analytics 4, always check the debug view as well. So let's go back to Google Analytics 4, configure, debug view, and then you will see that you have a bunch of events that are called menu link click. You can click on this one and you will see the values like link text, link URL, menu location, which is top menu, and the same will apply to other menu link clicks as well. So from this moment, within 24 hours, you will start seeing menu link click event right here in the events section, also in the reports section, and I mean the engagement events. So that is also available. Well, again, after 24 hours or within 24 hours. And also you will be able to use that data in the exploration reports as well. However, again, don't forget to publish these changes live because only after you do that, this event will start firing to all the visitors of your website. But we are not done yet completely because if we go back to the tag settings, you will remember that link text and link URL are taken from the documentation of enhanced measurement. So it means that Google Analytics will recognize these events and will display them in reports. So for example, if you go to Google Analytics 4 and create a new freeform exploration, and then if you want to start seeing some data about the events, for example, the link text or link URL, you will have to add them in the dimensions section of the exploration. So you will need to click this plus icon, and then you will need to look for parameters or actual dimensions such as link text or link URL. So since we are sending link text and link URL right here, they will be recognized and you will be able to see them in the report. For example, if we have, well, instead of city, we send the event name and also we send the link text and link URL. And then we filter down to see only those events of which event name contains menu link click. Then you would see that data right here. But again, since we haven't waited for 24 hours, we cannot see that data right here. But in the future, you will be able to do that when Google Analytics has enough time to process that information. So link text and link URL will be available in your reports and you will be able to use that. However, when it comes to menu location, here's what is going to happen. So let's say that I want to also report on menu location because I want to understand how people are interacting with my top menu and with my bottom menu of the website. So if I click plus and I enter menu, you will not find anything because I came up with that parameter. That parameter is not automatically recognized by Google Analytics 4 interface because that parameter is not available in the documentation. So to see that parameter as a dimension, you need to register it as a dimension. And that can be done by going to Configure, Custom Definitions, Create Custom Dimensions, and then enter the dimension name. So in this case, you can enter like a label or whatever you want to see in the reports. So that can be something like menu location. This is just a label that is more human readable. You can enter here whatever you want. But here in the event parameter, you must enter it exactly as it is right here. So menu underscore location, like that. If you don't see the parameter as a suggestion, don't worry, because this is what happens when you start sending a very new data that was not seen by this property before. And make sure that the scope of this is event, because with every event, the value of location of the menu item can be different. And now click Save. So once you do that, and we can see our dimension right here, from this moment, after 24 hours, you will start seeing that dimension in your exploration as well. So if we open that previously created freeform exploration, you will be able to add that to your report. So click dimensions plus, and then here you will be able to see that. But again, not so fast because I have just created it. And after 24 hours, I will start seeing that menu location in this list, and then I can import it into the analysis. If you want to learn more about how in general the freeform exploration works, I will post a link below the video to a guide where I explain how to work with it, because I understand that this is very confusing for those who are just starting with Google Analytics 4. So to sum up, if you're sending some parameters that are recognized automatically by Google Analytics 4, or in other words, they are mentioned in the documentation, at least in most cases, then you don't have to register them as custom dimensions. But if you're sending some custom parameter, you won't be able to see it in the reports unless you register them as custom dimensions. And that can be done by going to Configure, Custom Definitions, and then Create Custom Dimensions. And then obviously enter that information. In this field, you can enter whatever you want. This is as well whatever you want, but here you must enter exactly as it is entered right here. Even if you see the parameter incoming in the debug view, it will appear in your regular reports only after you register that custom dimension in GA4. And finally, when you properly test your setup, don't forget to publish your Google Tag Manager container by clicking Submit button and then completing all the other steps.
Awesome! You have made till the end of this tutorial. Now you have a better understanding of what Google Tag Manager is, how does it work, and how to create your first setup. However, keep in mind that this is just the beginning of your journey. There are still many things that you need to learn about GTM, and that's where my full course for beginners takes a spot. This video that you're watching right now explained around 10, maybe 15% of what the beginner actually should know about Google Tag Manager. The rest 85% are explained in my course, which is called Google Tag Manager Masterclass for Beginners. I will post a link to the course below the video. If you found this video useful, hit the thumbs up button below the video because it helps me continue working on this channel. Also, if you want to learn more about Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics 4, then consider subscribing to this channel. My name is Julius, this is Analytics Mania, and I'll see you in the next video.